Buenos dias, mis amigos. Bienvenidos. Hi, friends. Welcome back to episode 19 of the Language Tutor Spanish podcast. Mi nombre es Danny, and I'm your profesor de español. Thanks for coming and joining me on this episode. We're talking about school subjects in this episode. That's what we did on lesson 19 of the Language Tutor Spanish YouTube channel. We gave you a lot of words that have to do with school subjects, and hope you've been practicing those in conversation, bringing those in. I know some of you are probably not a student, but you can at least bring these into conversation. Maybe talk about somebody else and what somebody else is taking at school and what they do and what they like and what they don't like and what's interesting and what's boring and all of that. All this can be brought into conversations no matter who you are. So just like the last few episodes, I want to start by calling out the words that we learned in this lesson. I'll say them in English. I'm going to give you a little break to come up with it in Spanish, and then I'll tell you what it is in Spanish right after it. Let's just see how many of these words you've learned. And if there's some you don't, just memorize them, learn them really quick, rewind this episode, start over, go through the list again. When you feel comfortable, use them in conversation to internalize them, all right? Let's get started with school subjects, the word for school subjects. And we actually gave you two words on the episode. The first one was asignaturas, asignaturas. And the other one was asignaciones, asignaciones. All right, the next word is math or mathematics. And that was las matemáticas. No H in that word, as I told you on YouTube. No H in that word. And math is plural. The next one is science. And remember, it too is plural. And that is las ciencias. And up next is the history. History. And that is la historia with an H, but we don't say it. It looks like history almost in English. La historia. Up next is chemistry. And that is la química with a QU. La química. Up next is PE or physical education. And that is educación física. Educación física. And now social studies. We gave you two different ones. Social studies. Okay, that's estudios sociales, or you could have said ciencias sociales. Up next is computer science. And that is la informática. La informática. And now, family and consumer science is what it's known as now, but you might have known it as home economics. And you might find this one to be a little bit of a mouthful, a little challenging, but it's economía doméstica. Economía doméstica. All right, up next is art. Art. And that is el arte. Next is the languages. And that is las lenguas. And speaking of language, let's do some of those. Next is English. And that is inglés. And now Spanish. Español. And now German. And that is alemán. Alemán. And next is French. And that is francés. Francés. And now Latin. And that is Latin. Latin. Up next is intelligent. and that is inteligente. Inteligente with one L. And now, unfortunately, we have to use this to describe classes sometimes. Boring. And boring is aburrido. Aburrido. Up next is interesting. And that is interesante. Interesante. Easy. And that is fácil. Difficult. And that is difícil. Two more. The next one is required. And that is obligatorio. Obligatorio. And the last one, a pretty easy one, is popular. And that is popular. Popular, spelled just like it is in English. All right, friends, that wraps up our very first practice of this episode. Okay, let's begin with a new practice right now. And this time I want to go over just a few different words that we discussed on the episode, but then I want to use them in context, okay? So the first one, do you remember how to say how many? How many? That is cuantos. Up next, a lot or much. And that's mucho. We also learned the word for also or to, T-O-O. How do you say that? And that is también, también. We then learned the word for who. And that is quién. Now, when we're asking who is, and we're talking about one person, how do I say who is? And that is quién es. Now, if we make that plural and we say who are, we're talking about several people. Who are? How do we say that? And that is quiénes son. Quiénes son. Next up, what's the word for same? Same. And that is mismo. All right. The next one we learned was the word for all or everything. And that word is todo. T-O-D-O. Now remember, we can use that word in several different ways. Todo, toda, todos, and todas. So anytime you're going to say the whole something or all of something or every, you're going to usually use the word todo in some way or another. Here's an example, the whole world. Todo el mundo. Todo el mundo. Okay, or every person there. Todas las personas. So there's just a couple of different ways that we use those words. Okay, so last one we went over was the word for schedule. How do you say schedule? And that was horario with an H, horario. And now I want to ask some questions about classes. I'm going to ask, what time does a certain class start for someone in general? And I want you just to simply respond with what time that class starts, okay? Now, let's be very specific. Let's, first of all, use complete sentences. So if I were to ask you, what time does her science class start? You would want to say her science class starts at, don't just say the time, because the more we can practice complete sentences, the better we are. So the first one is, ¿a qué hora es la clase de matemáticas? ¿A qué hora es la clase de matemáticas? Now let's respond by saying, the class of mathematics is at 11 o'clock in the morning. So you should have said, la clase de matemáticas is at las 8:30 de la mañana. I'll say that again. La clase de matemáticas es a las 8:30 de la mañana. All right. The next one is asking you personally. ¿A qué hora es tu clase de ciencias? ¿A qué hora es tu clase de ciencias? Now respond with 10 o'clock in the morning. Your response should have been, mi clase de ciencias es a las 10 de la mañana. And I'll say that again. Mi clase de ciencias es a las 10 de la mañana. All right, the next one is, ¿cuándo es su clase de informática? Now we're saying su, that could be anybody we're talking about, okay? So, ¿cuándo es su clase de informática? Now let's respond with 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Your response to that should have been, su clase de informática es a las 2 de la tarde. Let me say that again. Su clase de informática es a las 2 de la tarde. All right, let's try one more. ¿Cuándo es la clase de educación física? ¿Cuándo es la clase de educación física? Now let's respond with 3:30 in the afternoon. All right, we should have said, la clase de educación física es a las 3:30 de la tarde. I'll say it again. La clase de educación física es a las 3:30 de la tarde. All right, my friends, we have really practiced these phrases today. We've got in a good practice together. I wish for each one of you paz y bendiciones, peace and blessings, and I hope you're having a great day or an afternoon or night wherever you are. Look forward to hanging out with you next time on episode 20 when we'll talk about ER and IR verbs. Have a great one. Hasta pronto.